අවසානයේ මෙම රැස්වීම සඳහා පැමිණි ඔබ සැම පළමුවෙන්ම මා ඉතා ගෞරවයෙන් සහ ආදරයෙන් පිළිගන්න අතරම විශේෂ නියෝජිතවරිය විදිහට මෙම ස්ථානයට පැමිණ සිටින ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ පාර්ලිමේන්තු එක්සත් ජාතික පක්ෂ නියෝජනය කරමින් ශ්‍රී ලංකා පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ කොළඹ දිස්ත්‍රික් මන්ත්‍රීවරිය ලෙස කටයුතු කරන රෝසි සේනානායක මහත්මියද මා ඉතා ආදරයෙන් පිළිගන්නවා.
Am I to speak in English or Sinhala?
Both, if you want. Now Sinhalese, up to you. English?
Okay, I'll speak in English and then whenever it's necessary and needed, I'll
English, okay,
switch to... Okay, it gives me immense pleasure actually to be here, standing amidst all of you. I know a vast majority of you are from the Southern California UNP branch. First of all, I have to thank Mangala and Sujata for inviting me for the protest. The protest was in aid of, as you, a lot of you have been, basically working very hard to organize the protest with regard to the release of General Fonseca. I'll get to the part of General Fonseca later. The fact that you're all very actively involved in supporting the party and your support, your contributions, we basically value it very much. And at a time like this, when the party has been in the opposition for almost 17 years, and when we have lost so many elections, defeat after defeat, we find it very difficult to muster support from our overseas branches. But I know the Californian branch has been very faithful and very committed. So thank you very much for the support. Thank you very much that you would instantaneously organize protests and things that are pertaining to issues with regard to the country nationally. I would like to commend, and I would really carry this message back to the party leadership. But I think also at the same time, since most of you have lived here for more than 10 years, some of you were born and raised here, some of you have come at the age of 2, 3, 4, 5, and you are basically Sri Lankans, of course, Americans of Sri Lankan origin. Still, you have a passion for your nation, and you still do the networking, and you have a link with each other. And that is something that I admire, because I strongly believe that we are not born Sri Lankan by accident. There's always a plan and a purpose to why we were born in that tiny little beautiful island. Going back to the island, if many of you remember, or people who came in the recent past knows exactly what kind of situation we live under. Say for an example, in the soon after independence or pre-independence, Sri Lanka was looked upon as a model country. Even though today the indicators show that among the South Asian nations, as far as literacy and health is concerned, Sri Lanka basically tops the list, and we've been looked up as a model nation. But there are the grey areas, maybe with regard to education or health. Now in the past, Japan was one of those countries who envied Sri Lanka, Singapore, Malaysia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. They all wanted to become like us. In the early 50s, our per capita income in comparison to Japan was just a $1 difference. We were a beautiful island with a great history, and with beautiful people who lived in harmony. We have to not forget that we are a multinational, multi-religious, multi-cultural society. Also lived in peace and harmony, and we were very self-sufficient as far as the economy was concerned. And it was a country that basically the entire neighboring countries envied. I remember, I think many of you know this story. This is a saying that we all very proudly brag about when we brag about history, how the Singaporean Prime Minister landed in Colombo and said, I wish to make Singapore one day like Colombo. We are now in the 21st century. But what went wrong? That's a question that we need to ask. Consecutively, the respective governments that have been governing, obviously something went wrong somewhere down the line, and we haven't been able to lift our heads. Fortunately, after 3 decades of the war, we have won the war, and much credit, I must say, have to be given to the government for basically supporting our soldiers to do the war. But I think the greatest credit should go to General Fonseca. He, if not for his commitment, his dedication, and his guts, He was a man who shed blood 3 times. He was almost been assassinated. When he was bombed just before the war was won. I mean, it's just the willpower to redeem our country from the deadliest terrorist group that kept him alive. We all know, we saw the footage where he held on to his gut when his stomach was spilling over, holding on to his gut, and basically being carried into an ambulance and taken in. And after that, for almost 15 days to a month, he was unconscious most of the time. But it was just the willpower to live and to come back, with the vengeance to win the war. And so we need to give him the credit for what he's done. And I think if not for him, we won't have. But at the same time, yesterday somebody basically pointed out about the failures of the opposition and the ceasefire agreement, and I had to vociferously to defend the opposition, because I strongly believe, even though General South Fonseca is a very strong commander and the best commander in the world today, who's been recognized as the best commander, we also have to remember that the war was like a relay race. To win this race, there were many people who basically did their part. And the first man to take the baton and run was Jaya Jayawardena. There was Rosy Premadasa, who laid his life for it. Saritha Tulamudali, Gamini Disanayaka, Ranjan Vijayaratna, Hector Kopakadu, Vijay Vimlavardhana. There were so many people. Chandrika Bandaranaika almost lost her eye. So we need to give them due credit over the years. But the man who ran the fastest and the longest in the relay was Ranil Wickremesinghe. That I have to, since you're a UN person, if anyone would basically condemn the 2 years of the United National Party from 2001 to 2004, I need to recorrect the sentiments of Mr. I forget his name yesterday, Makalanda, who vociferously was saying that we made a mistake in signing the ceasefire agreement with the terrorists, and what we did in those 2 years were not quite correct, and it was Mahinda Rajapaksa who did the right thing. Of course, as I started my speech, I said we need to commend the man for what he's done. But what Ranil Wickremesinghe did in those 2 years, let me just emphasize a little bit more and elaborate on it. In 2001, when he took over the government as Prime Minister, now the Prime Minister under an executive is a peon's job. I don't know whether you hear about the Prime Minister, the present Prime Minister, Mr. D.M. Jayaratna. He can't even hear to begin with. A great deal, no. Did you ever hear about Ratnasiri Wickramanayaka when he was Prime Minister? No. Of course, Mr. Premadasa is a different cup of tea altogether. That's because Jaya Jayawardena gave him the entire freedom to do what he had to do. So Prime Minister's job under an executive is basically a peon's job. But with this peon's job, first thing he did was he assessed the situation of the country. We had a minus growth rate at the time. People could not live, and we were in dire straits because the LTT was so strong. They had bombed the World Bank, they had bombed the Katunayake airport, they had bombed the oil tanks. There was mass destruction in the country. No investor was coming into the country. People were scared to fly into the country. And the harbour was about to be bombed. And so there was a premium on all the ships that were coming, and a lot of people were not coming in. So we could not do trade. The country had come to a standstill, and we were in a minus growth rate. As a result of this, the people were so desperate. Within 1 year of Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumarthunga winning an election, the entire creme de la creme of the cabinet crossed over to the opposition, and she had to dissolve parliament and go for an election. Within that 1 year, after a major election, the United National Party, except for 1 seat, won the entire nation. So simply because they knew that we couldn't survive anymore. So in a time like that, when we were bankrupt, and we were in debt to the entire world, we were in debt to Russia, we were in debt to Pakistan, we had so many war debts to pay. And we could not fight a war, we couldn't even feed the people. So Ranil decided, because terrorism that is unique to Sri Lanka should be eradicated in 3 different ways. Number 1 is, of course, war should have been the last, but first through a political solution, then war, and then internationally. We have only gone through the first leg, so we have to remember this. If people say that we have geographical victory is not the be-all and end-all of eradicating terrorism, and you yourselves who live overseas know this better than anyone else. I have to make this very clear. If we are to see lasting peace and to go back to history like what we were in the early 50s, then we have to eradicate terrorism through the means of a political solution and internationally as well. To defeat terrorism internationally, then we have to first look at a political solution. So what Ranil did at that time was, when the treasury was bankrupt and he couldn't move, he couldn't even pay the public servants' salaries, he decided to put a rest to the war, give an interval to the war, and to try and defeat the LTT politically. And that's what he did. So to defeat the LTT politically, of course, he had to get the support of the international community, and he went for a ceasefire. That's because he was smart, and Prabhakaran categorically, after defeating Ranil Wickremesinghe in 2005, at the Heroes Day of the LTT, said, I defeated Ranil Wickremesinghe because he's a cunning fox. You know, if he came into power, we would have been finished. But he little realized that, you know, what Ranil Wickremesinghe did in those 2 years had finished him anyway. So simply because those 2 years, ceasefire agreement, Ranil had a deal with the US. We were about to sign the free trade agreement with the US, which we couldn't because we went out of power before that. And he had got the warship. This warship was one of the biggest assets, one of the major components that enabled the war to win. That was number one, getting the warship. He got the US to demine the north and the east, which enabled our soldiers to advance and fight the battle in 2009. Not only that, he signed an agreement with India called the Supplyment of Arms, which India in that contract was going to come and train the Sri Lankan soldiers. So whilst the ceasefire agreement was going on, he was also basically strengthening the army, enabling the investors to come in, and the minus growth rate in a very short span of time rose to a 5.6. And what he did was, he told the people, tighten, fasten your belts. Give me 2 years to put this country right before I give you any kind of relief. And I mean, this is one of the reasons why we went out of power in 2004, because we hadn't given anything to the public. And whilst doing that, he paid all the war debts. And we were free of the war debts, basically a growth rate of 5.6. And the biggest asset for Mahinda Rajapaksa to win this war, what he did in those 2 years was he broke the LTT into 3, 4, 5. You have to understand, Karuna Aman was the then army commander of the LTT. Karuna Aman is the deadliest terrorist who might now sit on a one-to-one, and we talk about, you know, political solutions. This was the man who he was the militant leader, and he was the one who opposed the ceasefire agreement. But Ranil was smart enough to take Karuna Aman, Pilyan, and Tamil Chelvam, and the people that mattered, and put them on the ceasefire, the negotiating table, the peace talks. And he hadn't even gone into peace talks, even though people talk nonsense. This is talks on talks. He was just buying time to build the country. And it was talks on talks. When Karuna Aman and them started going out, they saw a different side to life. And also when we started integrating, I was the first woman to land in Jaffna, in that plane with Jala Jayawardena, the German ambassador. We had to take the German ambassador because the ceasefire agreement hadn't been signed in 2002, 14th of April, on Thai Pongal. We went to, you know, make peace with the people in Jaffna, and we were told not to. I was told special because I was the first woman. And with me, once our sister flew. Together with the few cabinet rehabilitation minister, Mr. Jala Jayawardena, and another minister, plus the entire Rupoini crew. We were in power. So we went to do Thai Pongal with Ananda Sangare and Maheswaran, who was killed, with these people, so that, you know, we will bridge the gap. And I remember when I stepped foot into Jaffna and we were traveling, we first went to Mr. Maheswaran's house, we were told not to move from the places where we were because the entire place was mined. And when we went to Chavakacheri, I mean, it was like a ghost town. It was like, you know, I've been to the Universal Studios, you know, where they shoot all the Western movies. It was a place like that. I mean, the rail tracks were removed and every building had bullet holes. And then maybe when we were driving through Kites, there were these beautiful mansions, homes. Half the roofs were gone. These belong to some of the people who live here, live overseas now, because they have now basically moved out of the country. And I must say, when people started integrating, people from the south were going to Nagadeepe, they were going to all the temples and whatever, and the people from the north, the LTT themselves, especially the LTT women, I have been dealing with them. They got married, some of them went overseas, you know, they saw a different side to life. And this is how Ranil Wickremesinghe crippled the LTT. Karuna Aman joined the SLFP with 8,000 soldiers. Out of the 8,000, 6,000 took membership. So 8,000 soldiers, and Pillayan, who was the commander of the East, broke away from the LTT. When Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe made a statement about Thoppigala, even though the government distorted it and, you know, basically highlighted it and made it look as if, you know, he was speaking something really stupid and nonsensical, because Karuna Aman was his bunker or his key territory was Thoppigala. He was out of Thoppigala. Thoppigala was just a calaver. That was the fact. It was not an insult on the army, but what Ranil was saying is sometimes Mr. Wickremesinghe can, when he articulates something in Sinhala, it doesn't come across the way he expects to say it. So that was the difference. But I must say, simply because the LTT's strength broke and the militants moved away from the LTT, that was also an added bonus. So in this short span of time, what Ranil Wickremesinghe did with the ceasefire agreement, buying time and trying to go for a political solution, where we needed to muster international community to basically bring in investors and also strengthen our economy and have the funds to build up and fight the war. Unfortunately, Chandrika got a whiff of it, because you have to remember this. I have to remind people, the entire donor community went to Japan and pledged $4.5 billion US dollars. This is just a donation. That 4.5 billion, if that came into the country, we would have been set free. But we couldn't even see the light of it, because the JVP knew if Ranil Wickremesinghe got the 4.5 billion, and if the entire international community supported Ranil to defeat LTT through the means of a political solution, and then cripple Prabhakaran and make him a non-entity, they would have never come back into power. So the JVP made a move, got Chandrika involved. Mangala was, of course, with Chandrika at the time. He thought it was a smart move, and that was the end of it. 2004, within 2 years, we were out of power, and then they started riding on. The ceasefire agreement was nonsensical. We gave the green light to the LTT to build their bunkers, but that was not so. That was not so. And so I must say, if anyone should get some credit, a state leader, not the commanders, it should be Ranil Wickremesinghe for the war, and not anyone else. So it made matters easier. I know for a fact when Mahinda Rajapaksa was signing checks to buy arms, he said, "Araya meva gevala tibbe naththam api meva gani." Araya gevala giya nisa thamai, api gevala giya nisa thamai. They had a basically a clean slate and a free hand to win the war. Okay, this is a golden opportunity. 2009 we won the war by crook, thanks to, of course, the president. I give him all the credit, and the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, for having, you know, that kind of courage to go ahead and give Fonseca a green light to do what he wanted. It was won, and this is a golden opportunity for us to correct ourselves, because the sad state of affairs back home is 40.16% of the population still live under a $2. Below $2 a day. Kan komma till kompisarna i vi med dig. Yes.
ලක්ෂ කීයද?
රන්දීර් පළාත් සභාවේ. පළාත් සභාවේ.
UNP එකේ ඉඳලාද ගියේ? ඔව්. දැන් 100ක්.
නෑ පළාත්.
ඒවට පොඩ අඩු
නෑ ඒවට ගන්න දෙන්නේ නෑ ඒවට. මේ මංගලෙන්ද?
මංගල ඔය යන්න මම ෆොටෝ කරනවා මම.
එකක් අරගෙන ආවා එන්න.
You sit down. You want
You have to see an elephant being.
I won't cut the elephant. I won't cut the elephant. Yes. Okay.
Bentar, aku bola.